A survey reveals that 3 in 4 businesses have gained better access to foreign markets through free trade agreements last year, and that's up from just 50% in 2021. They also enjoyed lower costs of doing business in overseas markets. And the Singapore Business Federation survey was done in the final quarter of last year. More than 800 firms across sectors such as finance, manufacturing and retail took part. One key finding is that more firms are familiar with FTAs, up 62% in 2021 to 85% last year. And such FTAs include the ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement and the ASEAN-China Free Trade Agreement. Still, some firms say FTAs are not beneficial to them. That is because it is not relevant to their business, or they just don't know enough about FTAs.
If you ask me what are some of the countries in which companies are increasingly looking to expand to that's not covered by FTA, I think increasingly we're looking at further markets, even Latin America and all that. And I know our governments are actively trying to strike FTAs with countries in that region too.
And for more on the results of the Singapore Business Federation survey, I'm now joined by the CEO of SBF, Kok Peng Soon. Peng Soon, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
More firms are seeing better access to FTAs compared to the last survey in 2021. What are some of the reasons behind this result?
Well, we ran this survey for a while, and actually we went in to do this survey to ask ourselves 3 questions. How companies are getting more familiar, whether companies are benefiting from it, and more important, the challenges. I think we are heartened with the increased numbers, and it demonstrates, I think, in no small part, so the efforts by the Singapore Business Federation, working together with MTI and Enterprise SG to educate more companies on the benefits of FTA and having direct advisory services to help them benefit from these FTAs.
So do you see this result as significant, this jump as significant? I mean, what does it signal really?
I think it signals that companies are increasingly going overseas and seeing the benefits of this. And 3 sectors actually stood out when we look at the results.
Okay.
The first sector that make use of these FTAs are the food and animal-related product manufacturing. The second are transport and storage. And then the third are really companies in financial and insurance services. Now you may ask yourself, what are companies using this for? I mean, think about it, companies in the food and product manufacturing, typically they face pretty high import tariffs from other countries. So the benefit of using this FTA is not just in terms of the preferential tariff rates, but they get shorter custom clearance times. They'll be able to get the goods being released much faster. And very importantly, for some of these products, you don't need to go for duplicative testing once it's being approved by the country.
Sure, and even with FTAs, there are concerns, though, over protectionist measures in recent years. There are concerns over geopolitical and trade tensions as well. Is that why firms are also making use of these FTAs?
Indeed. I think in a world where increasingly you are seeing more of these industrial interventionists, we need to work with countries that are continuing to be open-minded. Which is why if you look at the FTAs that are most used, I think in 2021 and 2023, we start to see a shift. In 2021, the top FTA that's being used by businesses is actually the ASEAN-China, followed by the ASEAN in trading goods. Whereas in 2023, you see that the top is now the trade in goods for ASEAN, and China has dropped out. In its place, you are seeing the ASEAN-EU FTA becoming the number 2. And third, the RCEP agreement is coming in. So you can see that, while other countries are raising their tariffs, for countries that come together and work together, you see companies doing more of that. And in fact, you see trade increasing.
And you were highlighting some of the FTAs there. We have ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement, ASEAN-China FTA, and some of the recent ones, RCEP and CPTPP. I suppose depending on the industry or sector of these businesses, they would benefit differently across these different agreements.
That's right. And that you have to understand the different structure of these FTAs. Okay. A lot of FTAs, you focus a lot on the trade in goods. But increasingly, there are other FTA chapters that cover trade in services, they cover investment, they cover government procurement, and cover e-commerce. So it really depending on the type of goods that you are in. But I think what we are happy to see is that the RCEP, actually that agreement, it covers like almost a third of the world's population and a third of the GDP. It comprises 15 countries, not just the ASEAN countries, but China, South Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. And in 2023, we see that that agreement is coming into fruition, is entered into force, and companies are using it. And that's important Because when companies use these FTA, they're able to redesign some of their operations to make use of the different competitive advantage. And together with a cumulative rules of origin, they can benefit from lower tariff rates.
Another interesting finding from this survey is that nearly a quarter of firms said that FTAs are not relevant to them. I mean, why are they not able to use these agreements? Did they face or do they face, some sort of setbacks or pushback? Any sort of challenges that are stopping them from, tapping these FTAs that are made available to them?
Yes, you rightly pointed out a quarter of them said that they're not relevant. Maybe not relevant because they're either domestic focused or they're just not reached the sort of maturity to actually go overseas. The number 2 and number 3 reasons that cited in the survey, other than they think it's not relevant, is they think that FTAs are too complicated. They do not have enough knowledge. And I can empathize with these findings. I mean, if you even try to look through these FTA documents, it's heavily legalistic, right? It's very technical. Companies got to deal with understanding what they mean by rules of origin. What is a HS code? What is a manufacturing cost of operation? It can be quite daunting to SMEs, which is why we've made it a priority in the Singapore Business Federation to increase these efforts to outreach to companies, to tell them more about FTA and provide advisory services.
And what sectors do they likely belong in, most of these firms that are not using the FTAs?
Well, they're likely more domestically focused, some of the retail sector, some of the services sector.
I see.
But I think increasingly, if you look at the scope of the economy that we have, more companies are increasingly able to do that, particularly as some of these agreements broaden beyond trade in goods to trade in services.
Sure. Peng Soon, I think we have time for one last question. Can you also give us a sneak peek into some of the new initiatives in SBF's pipeline to help Singapore's businesses go global moving forward?
Thank you so much for giving me that opportunity. So next week, we are going to be organizing the Singapore Apex Business Summit. Over 3 days, we have over 100 speakers. We have many government leaders, including President Tharman, the 2 Deputy Prime Minister, Senior Ministers Teo speaking. And we're going to deal with issues ranging from digitalization to sustainability to the future of trade. And during that week, we'll announce new partnerships with like-minded companies to work with Singapore companies to bring them overseas. We're going to announce a new public-private initiative to expand our capacity and our network to help more companies make good use of the FTAs.
Peng Soon, thank you very much for speaking with us tonight. That was Peng Soon, CEO of the Singapore Business Federation.